Creativity is a phenomenon whereby something new and somehow valuable is formed. The created item may be intangible or a physical object. Scholarly interest in creativity involves many definitions and concepts pertaining to a number of disciplines: psychology, cognitive science, education, philosophy, technology, theology, sociology, linguistics, business studies, songwriting, and economics, covering the relations between creativity and general intelligence, mental and neurological processes, personality type and creative ability. Creativity and mental health. The potential for fostering creativity through education and training, especially as augmented by technology, and the application of creative resources to improve the effectiveness of teaching and learning. Definition. In a summary of scientific research into creativity, Michael Mumford suggested, over the course of the last decade, however, we seem to have reached a general agreement that creativity involves the production of novel, useful products, or, in Robert Sternberg's words, the production of something original and worthwhile. Authors have diverged dramatically in their precise definitions beyond these general commonalities. Peter Moisberger reckons that over 100 different analyses can be found in the literature. As an illustration, one definition given by Dr. E. Paul Torrance described it as a process of becoming sensitive to problems, deficiencies, gaps in knowledge, missing elements, disharmonies, and so on, identifying the difficulty, searching for solutions, making guesses, or formulating hypotheses about the deficiencies, testing and retesting these hypotheses and possibly modifying and retesting them, and finally, communicating the results. Aspects. Theories of creativity have focused on a variety of aspects. The dominant factors are usually identified as the 4 Ps: process, product, person and place. A focus on process is shown in cognitive approaches that try to describe thought mechanisms and techniques for creative thinking. Theories invoking divergent rather than convergent thinking, or those describing the staging of the creative process, are primarily theories of creative process. A focus on creative product usually appears in attempts to measure creativity and in creative ideas framed as successful memes. The psychometric approach to creativity reveals that it also involves the ability to produce more. A focus on the nature of the creative person considers more general intellectual habits, such as openness, levels of ideation, autonomy, expertise, exploratory behavior and so on. A focus on place considers the circumstances in which creativity flourishes, such as degrees of autonomy, access to resources and the nature of gatekeepers. Creative lifestyles are characterized by non-conforming attitudes and behaviors as well as flexibility. Etymology. The lexeme in the English word creativity comes from the Latin term creo, to create, make. Its derivational suffixes also come from Latin. The word create appeared in English as early as the 14th century, notably in Chaucer, to indicate divine creation. However, its modern meaning as an act of human creation did not emerge until after the Enlightenment. History of the concept. Ancient views. Most ancient cultures, including thinkers of ancient Greece, ancient China, and ancient India, lacked the concept of creativity, seeing art as a form of discovery and not creation. The ancient Greeks had no terms corresponding to create or creator, except for the expression poiein, which only applied to poiesis and to the poets who made it. Plato did not believe in art as a form of creation. Asked in the Republic, "Will we say, of a painter, that he makes something?" he answers, "Certainly not. He merely imitates." It is commonly argued that the notion of creativity originated in Western culture through Christianity, as a matter of divine inspiration. According to the historian Daniel J. Borstein, the early Western conception of creativity was the biblical story of creation given in the Genesis. However, this is not creativity in the modern sense, which did not arise until the Renaissance. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, Creativity was the sole province of God. Humans were not considered to have the ability to create something new except as an expression of God's work. A concept similar to that of Christianity existed in Greek culture. For instance, muses were seen as mediating inspiration from the gods. Romans and Greeks invoked the concept of an external creative demon, or genius, linked to the sacred or the divine. However, none of these views are similar to the modern concept of creativity, and the individual was not seen as the cause of creation until the Renaissance. It was during the Renaissance that creativity was first seen, not as a conduit for the divine, but from the abilities of great men. The Enlightenment, and after the rejection of creativity in favor of discovery and the belief that individual creation was a conduit of the divine, would dominate the West probably until the Renaissance and even later. The development of the modern concept of creativity begins in the Renaissance, when creation began to be perceived as having originated from the abilities of the individual, and not God. This could be attributed to the leading intellectual movement of the time, aptly named humanism, which developed an intensely human-centric outlook on the world, valuing the intellect and achievement of the individual. From this philosophy arose the Renaissance man, an individual who embodies the principles of humanism in their ceaseless courtship with knowledge and creation. One of the most well-known and immensely accomplished examples is Leonardo da Vinci. However, this shift was gradual and would not become immediately apparent until the Enlightenment. By the 18th century and the Age of Enlightenment, mention of creativity, linked with the concept of imagination, became more frequent. In the writing of Thomas Hobbes, imagination became a key element of human cognition. William Duff was one of the first to identify imagination as a quality of genius, typifying the separation being made between talent and genius. As a direct and independent topic of study, creativity effectively received no attention until the 19th century. Runco and Albert argue that creativity as the subject of proper study began seriously to emerge in the late 19th century, with the increased interest in individual differences inspired by the arrival of Darwinism. In particular, they refer to the work of Francis Galton, who through his eugenicist outlook took a keen interest in the heritability of intelligence, with creativity taken as an aspect of genius. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, leading mathematicians and scientists such as Hermann von Helmholtz and Henri Poincaré began to reflect on and publicly discuss their creative processes. 20th century to the present day, the insights of Poincaré and von Helmholtz were built on in early accounts of the creative process by pioneering theorists such as Graham Wallas and Max Wertheimer. In his work Art of Thought, published in 1926, Wallas presented one of the first models of the creative process. In the Wallas stage model, creative insights and illuminations may be explained by a process consisting of 5 stages: preparation, incubation, intimation, illumination or insight, verification. Wallas's model is often treated as 4 stages, with intimation seen as a substage. Wallas considered creativity to be a legacy of the evolutionary process which allowed humans to quickly adapt to rapidly changing environments. Simonton provides an updated perspective on this view in his book, Origins of Genius: Darwinian Perspectives on Creativity. In 1927, Alfred North Whitehead gave the Gifford Lectures at the University of Edinburgh, later published his Process and Reality. He is credited with having coined the term creativity to serve as the ultimate category of his metaphysical scheme. Whitehead actually coined the term, our term, still the preferred currency of exchange among literature, science, and the arts. A term that quickly became so popular, so omnipresent, that its invention within living memory, and by Alfred North Whitehead of all people, quickly became occluded. The formal psychometric measurement of creativity, from the standpoint of orthodox psychological literature, is usually considered to have begun with J. P. Guilford's 1950 address to the American Psychological Association, which helped popularize the topic and focus attention on a scientific approach to conceptualizing creativity. Statistical analysis led to the recognition of creativity as a separate aspect of human cognition to IQ-type intelligence, into which it had previously been subsumed. Guilford's work suggested that above a threshold level of IQ, the relationship between creativity and classically measured intelligence broke down. 4C model. James C. Kaufman and Beghetto introduced a 4C model of creativity, mini C, little c, pro C and big C. This model was intended to help accommodate models and theories of creativity that stressed competence as an essential component and the historical transformation of a creative domain as the highest mark of creativity. It also, the authors argued, made a useful framework for analyzing creative processes in individuals. The contrast of terms big C and little c has been widely used. Coesbelt, Beghetto and Runco use a little c, big C model to review major theories of creativity. Margaret Bowden distinguishes between H creativity and P creativity. Robinson and Anna Kraft have focused on creativity in a general population, particularly with respect to education. Kraft makes a similar distinction between high and little c creativity, and cites Ken Robinson as referring to high and democratic creativity. Miley C6 and Miley has defined creativity in terms of those individuals judged to have made significant creative, perhaps domain-changing contributions. Simonton has analyzed the career trajectories of eminent creative people in order to map patterns and predictors of creative productivity. Theories of creative processes. There has been much empirical study in psychology and cognitive science of the processes through which creativity occurs. Interpretation of the results of these studies has led to several possible explanations of the sources and methods of creativity. Incubation. Incubation is a temporary break from creative problem-solving that can result in insight. There has been some empirical research looking at whether, as the concept of incubation in Wallace model implies, a period of interruption or rest from a problem may aid creative problem-solving. Ward lists various hypotheses that have been advanced to explain why incubation may aid creative problem-solving, and notes how some empirical evidence is consistent with the hypothesis that incubation aids creative problem-solving in that it enables forgetting of misleading clues. Absence of incubation may lead the problem solver to become fixated on inappropriate strategies of solving the problem. This work disputes the earlier hypothesis that creative solutions to problems arise mysteriously from the unconscious mind while the conscious mind is occupied on other tasks. This earlier hypothesis is discussed in C6 and Miley's 5-phase model of the creative process, which describes incubation as a time that your unconscious takes over. This allows for unique connections to be made without your consciousness trying to make logical order out of the problem. Convergent and divergent thinking. J. P. Guilford drew a distinction between convergent and divergent production. Convergent thinking involves aiming for a single, correct solution to a problem, whereas divergent thinking involves creative generation of multiple answers to a set problem. Divergent thinking is sometimes used as a synonym for creativity in psychology literature. Other researchers have occasionally used the terms flexible thinking or fluid intelligence, which are roughly similar to creativity. Creative cognition approach. In 1992, Finker et al. Proposed the Geneplour model, in which creativity takes place in two phases. A generative phase, where an individual constructs mental representations called pre-inventive structures, and an exploratory phase where those structures are used to come up with creative ideas. Some evidence shows that when people use their imagination to develop new ideas, those ideas are heavily structured in predictable ways by the properties of existing categories and concepts. Weisberg argued, by contrast, that creativity only involves ordinary cognitive processes yielding extraordinary results. The explicit-implicit interaction theory. Herlier and Son recently proposed a unified framework for understanding creativity in problem-solving, namely the explicit-implicit interaction theory of creativity. This new theory constitutes an attempt at providing a more unified explanation of relevant phenomena. The EEII theory relies mainly on 5 basic principles. Namely 1. The coexistence of and the difference between explicit and implicit knowledge. 2. The simultaneous involvement of implicit and explicit processes in most tasks. 3. The redundant representation of explicit and implicit knowledge. 4. The integration of the results of explicit in implicit processing. And 5. The iterative processing. A computational implementation of the theory was developed based on a Clarion cognitive architecture and used to simulate relevant human data. This work represents an initial step in the development of process-based theories of creativity encompassing incubation, insight, and various other related phenomena. Conceptual blending in the act of creation. Arthur Koestler introduced the concept of bisociation, that creativity arises as a result of the intersection of 2 quite different frames of reference. The idea was later developed into conceptual blending. In the 90s, various approaches in cognitive science that dealt with metaphor, analogy and structural mapping have been converging, and a new integrative approach to the study of creativity in science, art and humor has emerged under the label conceptual blending. Honing theory. Honing theory posits that creativity arises due to the self-organizing, self-mending nature of a worldview, and that it is by way of the creative process the individual hones an integrated worldview. Honing theory places equal emphasis on the externally visible creative outcome and the internal cognitive restructuring brought about by the creative process. Indeed, one factor that distinguishes it from other theories of creativity is that it focuses on not just restructuring as it pertains to the conception of the task, but as it pertains to the worldview as a whole. When faced with a creatively demanding task, there is an interaction between the conception of the task and the worldview. The conception of the task changes through interaction with the worldview, and the worldview changes through interaction with the task. This interaction is reiterated until the task is complete, at which point not only is the task conceived of differently, but the worldview is subtly or drastically transformed. Thus, another distinguishing feature of honing theory is that the creative process reflects the natural tendency of a worldview to attempt to resolve dissonance and seek internal consistency amongst its components. Whether they be ideas, attitudes, or bits of knowledge, it mends itself as a body when it has been injured. Yet another central, distinguishing feature of honing theory is the notion of a potentiality state. Honing theory posits that creative thought proceeds not by searching through and randomly mutating predefined possibilities, but by drawing upon associations that exist due to overlap in the distributed neural cell assemblies that participate in the encoding of experiences. In memory, midway through the creative process, one may have made associations between the current task and previous experiences, but not yet disambiguated which aspects of those previous experiences are relevant to the current task. Thus, the creative idea may feel half-baked. It is at that point that it can be said to be in a potentiality state, because how it will actualize depends on the different internally or externally generated contexts it interacts with. Honing theory can account for many phenomena that are not readily explained by other theories of creativity. For example, creativity was commonly thought to be fostered by a supportive, nurturing, trustworthy environment conducive to self-actualization. However, research shows that creativity is actually associated with childhood adversity, which would stimulate honing. Honing theory also makes several predictions that differ from what would be predicted by other theories. For example, empirical support has been obtained using analogy problem-solving experiments for the proposal that midway through the creative process one's mind is in a potentiality state. Other experiments show that different works by the same creator exhibit a recognizable style or voice, and that this same recognizable quality even comes through in different creative outlets. This is not predicted by theories of creativity that emphasize chance processes or the accumulation of expertise, but it is predicted by honing theory, according to which personal style reflects the creator's uniquely structured worldview. This theory has been developed by Liang Gabora. Everyday imaginative thought. In everyday thought, people often spontaneously imagine alternatives to reality when they think, if only. Their counterfactual thinking is viewed as an example of everyday creative processes. It has been proposed that the creation of counterfactual alternatives to reality depends on similar cognitive processes to rational thought.